Welcome everyone to our Packers News pregame live chat alongside Pete Dougherty. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers are just 90 minutes away from their matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. We'll bring you the latest on the injury report, plus we'll preview today's game in just a moment. Before we get into that, as always, you can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. Pete and I want to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. It seemed like cornerback Kevin King's bones and ligaments have been made out of glass over the last several weeks. He's been dealing with a quad injury. He was sidelined for the last 5 games, and then finally he came off the injury report on Friday, only to be put back on the injury report on Saturday with an Achilles injury. However, finally he is active today. Today's game he will play. He has not played in the last 5 games. The Packers defense is going to need to step up in today's game. Colts quarterback Philip Rivers is known to get the ball out quickly. He has the 4th lowest time of getting the ball out in the entire NFL. How can the Packers get Rivers off his rhythm today?
It's tough because he does get it out fast, so it's tough to do it with the rush. So maybe by jamming receivers, playing physical coverage to disrupt the timing, so getting the ball out fast doesn't work as well. You can't do the same thing every down, but mixing a lot of that in there. That's probably as good a way as any. And then, if you stop the run and make them drop back and pass, get them in 3rd and 7 or more, enough times, that probably increases your odds too, because he's going to want to get the ball far enough downfield where the ball's traveling for a first down.
Packers fans, your weapon, J.K. Scott, is active in today's game as well. He was added to the injury report, quote unquote, even though he didn't have an injury yesterday. He was dealing with a personal matter yesterday. He was listed as questionable for today's game. He did not travel with the team yesterday. However, he managed to get out on a flight this morning. He is there and he is active in today's game against the Colts. The Packers special teams unit as a whole needs to pull it together this weekend against the Colts after they gave up a 91-yard punt return for a touchdown last week. This game, especially, the Colts special teams unit is pretty good. They've had a couple blocked punts, and they've also returned a kickoff for a touchdown this season. What can the Packers do to put the special back in special teams?
Yeah, cover the punts a lot. I mean, that was just really poor coverage on that one. It was kind of a low punt, so that didn't help. But they had 4 guys basically running down the field in almost a line, and that's the exact opposite of how you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to be covering lanes horizontally, not one lane vertically. So it's just, cleaning up things like that will matter. I think it's pretty big to have Scott punting, just because it's hard to break in a new punter just for one game, the timing and everything, and you just can't, you can't mess around. You can't get one blocked. So just getting the punt off has to be the priority. Plus, he's the holder, so that's really big. Because you drop a snap or get a bad hold, that could cost you a ball game. So it's fairly significant that the guy's able to play today.
More good injury-related news for the Packers. The team's going to have all of their 3 core offensive playmakers active for today's game for the first time since week 2. Wide receiver Allen Lazard, who was questionable heading into today's game with a core injury, is active today. So Devontae Adams and running back Aaron Jones will all be active on the field for the first time since week 2. Those first 2 games of the season, the Packers were averaging 42.5 points. When those 3 are healthy, as they will be today, what can this Packers offense do?
I find it hard to believe that Lazard is going to be all that much of a factor considering how long he's been out. And I don't know what their plans are for how much to play. Now, he's been practicing for a few weeks, but still, you wouldn't think you'd think he'll need a couple of games to get, into game shape and game sharp. But having Adams is obviously big, even if he's not 100%, as long as, he's such a refined route runner and everything that I would still think he'll, be able to get open enough, and he'll demand coverage, which helps Valdez-Scantling a lot. He's much better when Adams is playing, Valdez-Scantling is, than when Adams isn't. But it helps them, it's just going to help everything to have everybody available. And if things go well for a few weeks in a row to kind of get the offense going to where it was early in the season.
The Packers may be on the road, however, it is Dome Sweet Dome down at Lucas Oil Stadium today. On the road, the Packers have been very successful. Aaron Rodgers specifically has had 11 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 128.2 passer rating on turf this season. How likely is it that the Packers get a boost from being indoors?
It'll help them a lot more than, playing 25-mile-an-hour winds. It's tough to throw the ball in that. It's funny, because under Favre, they were always known as this really good home, on grass, bad weather team. And Favre, especially in the first few years as a starter, his dome record was just terrible. Now, part of it was the teams they played in domes were all good teams. But Rodgers always had a great dome record, just going back to, 09, 10, 11. And he always played great in domes. He's a precision passer, all of that. Plus, back then, they had all those weapons. They had Nelson and Cobb and James Jones and Donald Driver. So they could put a lot of talent, receiving talent on the field. So that made them a really dangerous dome team. I think Rodgers is still good in domes, for the same reasons he was before. He's not quite as athletic as he was, definitely. But he's still a precise thrower and a really good thrower and strong arm. So I think he seems to like playing in domes. They don't have the receiver talent they did. But, if it helps the quarterback, it helps the team.
Let's throw it over to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube for some of your questions. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Hopefully, you're having a great Sunday so far. Let's start with Andrew. Andrew over on Facebook. Good to see you, Andrew. Andrew asks, do you think that the Packers can get the run game going today? This Colts defense is really good against the run. They're only averaging 3.8 yards per attempt against opposing teams. How likely is it that running backs Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are able to rip some big runs today?
I think the Colts are a really good defense. I think they're the best defenses in the league. Tampa comes to mind. The Colts. I think there's one other team I'm forgetting about. But they're probably one of the three best defenses in the league. The Bears are probably fairly far up there too. So run the ball is going to be tough. This will be a really good test for their offense as a whole, but especially for their run game. It helps to have both Aaron Jones and Williams available. Not having Ervin to do all the jet sweep stuff. That's, even though the jet sweep doesn't get the ball very often, just the threat of that play makes the linebackers have to honor it, so it stretches the defense just a little bit horizontally. So they'll probably miss him. I wonder if that's one of the reasons they brought Weber up, was to handle some of that stuff. Maybe I don't know if he's going to be doing any of the flanker jet sweep stuff or not. But to your original question, I don't know how likely it is that they run the ball well today. The Colts are a good defense, so I don't know if they have to run it great. They just have to be able to run it well enough that it helps the run game too, that it helps the passing game too, and maybe makes the Colts commit a little more scheme personnel to stopping the run than they would prefer to.
Thanks, Andrew, for your question. We can continue this conversation about the run game. John over on Facebook asks, who takes running back Tyler Ervin's spot today? Pete, you were just talking about this a little bit. Ervin is out today. He is traditionally the wingback, the pre-snap motion that helps this run game go. Who, if Ervin is now not available, who is taking his spot today in the Packers offense?
Maybe Weber will do some of it. Like I said, I don't know anything about him other than he went to Ohio State. And I looked up his 40 time yesterday, and it was in the upper 4.4s, if I remember right. I think it was like 4.48, maybe something like that, which is, it's not blazing, but it's it's pretty good. So that's one possibility. They've used just about everybody else. Lazard even was doing some jet sweep stuff or some orbit motion stuff early in the year before he got hurt. So maybe he'll do a little bit of it. Any of them can, but Ervin is the preferred guy, and I don't, like I said, I haven't seen Weber play. Maybe they have something in store with doing him with that, or even sometimes putting Aaron Jones there like they did a few weeks ago.
Thank you, John, for your question. Quick shout out over to Periscope Cheesehead says, congrats on the Northwestern win, Olivia. Big win. Cats are 5-0. Appreciate the love. Let's take a question here from our friend Eric, friend of the show. Good to see you, Eric. Eric wants to know, can this Packers football team win the NFC? If everything ended tomorrow, which in 2020, who knows what could happen, the Packers would have the number 1 seed in the NFC. They're 7-2. They're ahead of the Saints right now. Pete, could the Packers hold on to that number 1 seed throughout the rest of the season?
If you look at their schedule, it's there's it's certainly a possibility. They could easily lose today. They've got one more tough game. Now I'm blanking on it, but there's one more tough game before it's all over. But then it's a lot of games against, it's 2 against the Bears. They got a lot of winnable games going 6-2. It looks like a really good possibility for them, which 12-4 might get you the top seed. I still think Tampa might be the best team in the NFC. I don't know if I'm basing that just because of the way they wiped the field with the Packers, but they do have a lot of talent on defense, and as Tom Brady gets more used to playing in that offense, and they have a lot of good skill players too. I think they're the most dangerous team, but the Saints I have doubts about. Once you get in the postseason, does Drew Brees still have the arm to throw it downfield enough to challenge defenses enough where they can win a couple really tough playoff games in a row? I'm not so sure about that. So I would guess the Packers' chances are, they're as good as anybody's. I think if you look at the Vegas odds, it's really close for the top 3 teams for who's going to win the NFC. I mean, there's hardly any difference in the spread. So yeah, as of right now, I think their chances are as good as anybody. I would still think the Chiefs would be in my mind, are a fairly heavy favorite to win it all because, their quarterback is just so good.
Thanks, Eric, as always, for joining and for asking insightful questions. We appreciate it. Joshua over on Facebook wants to know, what do you think about the offense at full potential? This is the healthiest the Packers offense has been possibly all season, not just with the addition of wide receiver Allen Lazard. Also, if you look at the offensive line, too, this is going to be the 2nd consecutive week that the offensive line has all its starters, with the return last week of left tackle David Bakhtiari after he missed a few games with a chest injury. What can this offense do, not just from a skill position standpoint, but throughout the entire offense now that they are firing on all cylinders?
Yeah, that helps a lot because an offensive line is a lot like a basketball team where the whole can be a lot greater than the sum of the parts if the guys play a lot together and just have a lot of timing and chemistry. So getting that starting group and not having guys moving positions would help a lot. Now, injuries are part of the game, and who knows, they could get 2 injuries on the offensive line today, but that would help a lot. Just go back to the last question. I see Craig, is saying that the tough game that I forgot about, which is he's right, is Tennessee in a few weeks.
That will be a tough game. I'm looking forward to that one. Thank you, Joshua, for your question. Yeah, Craig said it. Andrew says it. I'm looking forward to that Titans game as well. Let's take a question here from Levi. Levi over on Facebook says, with the Colts offensive line being so good, will defensive coordinator Mike Pettin rush 3 and play coverage a lot today? The Colts offensive line has only allowed 8 or 9 sacks all season. What is the answer for defensive coordinator Mike Pettin as he approaches this game today?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of rushing 3 because you're just conceding, giving the quarterback all day. You can have 11 guys in coverage. You give them enough time. They're going to find somebody. So I would think they're going to want to rush 4 or 5 a little bit more, or most of the time. So that's what I would do. It's probably just mixing up coverages, and you just somebody's got to make a play. Rivers will, even though he's played historically very well against the Packers, he'll throw some risky passes. He's thrown a lot of over the last 2 or 3 years. He's thrown a lot of interceptions. So somebody's just got to make a play that can turn the game.
Thank you, Levi, for your question and for joining us as always. Steve over on Facebook wants to know, has kicker Mason Crosby recovered enough to take over kickoff duties? A couple weeks ago, Crosby relinquished that job when he was dealing with a lower body injury. And now, after the last couple weeks, he has finally been practicing. He practiced all week in a full capacity. He was not on the injury report whatsoever. How likely is it that Crosby resumes his kickoff duties?
I got no idea on that. And even being at practice, I would think they don't do any special team stuff when you guys are there, right? So I don't know if you saw those guys working on anything. So I just have no idea. I don't know if Scott's absence late in the week would affect that at all. But if Crosby's, it was a calf injury, is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, if that's still bothering him at all, even a little bit, I would think they wouldn't want to risk it because they don't want him running hard, running up to kick the ball, having to run down a little bit on coverage. But I don't know if he's going to be handling it today or not. Just no idea.
We'll find out soon, Steve. Thanks for joining us today. Timmy over on Facebook asks, how does Green Bay manage their salary cap after signing David Bakhtiari and defensive lineman Kenny Clark to extensions? And can the Packers avoid Aaron Jones? I suppose, how are the Packers going to approach Aaron Jones? He is also a free agent in 2021. Kevin King becomes a free agent in 2021. So does center Corey Linsley and running back Jamal Williams. Now that the Packers have two of their bigger contract extensions under their belt, how do they approach the rest of 2021 free agency?
So I'm not as, I don't know if doom and gloom is the right. The Packers obviously there are cap issues. A lot of teams have them because the cap's going down next year because the revenue is going down this year because of all the no fans in the stadium. But I think they have more flexibility than a lot of people do. If you look at their cash spending, which is really the more important thing, is cash and budgets. Their cash spending over the last 5 years, over the last 4 years, is just a hair more than average, and over the last 5, it's just a hair under. So they've got plenty of cash to do the cap manipulating stuff that you need to do without wrecking their future. So they're going to do a lot of contract. They might do an extension with Devontae Adams in the offseason, which would lower his cap number next year. But they'll do some restructuring too. Aaron Rodgers is definitely going to get a restructure. Bakhtiari, they'll turn his off-season bonus into a signing bonus, which creates cap room. A couple of guys are going to get cut, but they're guys they might have cut anyway because they, like someone like, Rick Wagner, I could see him getting cut, and they'll draft a backup tackle. Kirksey, I would guess he'll get cut. All that'll save a lot of money. I still think they're going to re-sign Jones or maybe even franchise tag him, and they'll still have enough room. They'll have to do a lot of manipulating, but they'll still have room if they could sign a bargain free agent or two next year too. I think there's a lot of possibilities for all those things. And after they did the extension, they had Gutekunst on Zoom last Sunday after the game, and he basically suggested as much because he said, part of this was part of their plan for next year, and that he mentioned that because next year is going to be such a bloodletting with players getting cut around the league, that there could be some real opportunities, I think was the word he used out there. So he's planning on having some money to sign some guys next season, even if, he's looking for bargain type stuff. But that suggests that there's a lot of moves to come between now and the beginning of free agency next March.
The salary cap minimum is $175 million next season, which is far less than what was anticipated as a result of how COVID-19 is impacting the league this year. We will see exactly what that number is as we approach free agency in 2021. Thanks, Timmy, for your question. We appreciate you joining us. As always, let's throw it back to Joshua over on Facebook. Joshua says outside linebacker Rashawn Gary will have a career day today. He showed potential at the end of the Jaguars game. Gary came up with a big sack at the end of the game. The Jaguars had their final drive, and Gary, Preston Smith were able to have 2 big sacks to seal the deal for the Packers. How likely is it that Rashawn Gary is able to follow that up with yet another impressive performance today?
He actually had the last 3 plays of the game were good. I think he got the sack on the first one. The second one, he squeezed the pocket, and that took away any room to get out of the pocket, and that allowed Preston Smith to come from the backside and get a sack. And on the third play, they chased the guy out of the pocket, and Gary was the one who basically ran him to the sidelines, and it was fourth down on that play. He had nothing and tried to pass that he just threw it out of bounds, well short of a first down. So that was 3 good plays, and he played okay, in the rest of the game too. He may have some limitations as a rusher, and that's why he never put up big numbers at Michigan. But he's still a very talented, powerful guy, and I think the Packers are probably looking for this guy to just kind of, if not just completely take off the second half of the season, just keep playing better and become a guy who starts impacting games more.
Thank you, Joshua, for joining us and for your questions. That is going to do it for us this afternoon. Who knows what time it is? It's going to do it for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I will be live after the game with Ryan Wood to wrap everything up. So bring your questions, come back here, and we will see you there. For Pete Dougherty, I am Olivia Reiner. We'll see you next time.